Hello and welcome to another episode of The 30, a podcast which is normally exclusive to our Patreon members. And if you are a Patreon member, you will understand what The 30 is. If you don't understand what The 30 is and why you're listening to this on the main Arsecast feed, I will give you that answer in a second. But just to introduce my regular co-host for this podcast, it's Phil Costa. Hello, Phil.
Hello, Andrew. Yes, we're in the mainstream. No paywall for this.
No.
Feels good to be back, though. I'm happy to be doing this again because once you get in the rhythm and the routine of doing it every Monday, we're on talking and it's nice and we can talk about stuff that happens. Usually laughing at people as well, which is always good. So yeah, it's good to be back.
It is, and we're all refreshed and recharged ahead of the new season after a summer. Where a lot of stuff has happened. But just to lay this out for anybody who's listening who isn't a Patreon member, one of the podcasts that people get every week as part of the extra content on Patreon is this one. It's called The 30, and it's where we talk about all the weekend's Premier League action in 30 minutes, more or less, always more. That is the key to this podcast. It might sound like, 30 minutes, but you usually get twice that. So it's double value. That's the great thing about this show. And I don't know, maybe I'll try and describe it a little bit for people who might want to get on board this season. We look at all the games that happen in the Premier League, unless a bad thing happens somewhere and we don't want to talk about it. So there's the Arsenal game, and there are usually 9 other Premier League games. Sometimes there are only 8 Premier League games because, as a general rule, we don't talk about Tottenham if they win. That's just kind of what we do around here. And that seems fair, right?
I mean, that's the most principled thing we do on this podcast, I think. So entirely fair. And, on the occasions that they don't win, for example, it's almost like a bonus for the listeners.
Yes.
We can do a deep dive into their high line, for example. Thank you, Saranj, wherever you may be.
Rest in peace.
Defensive mistake, an injury could happen somewhere. So, it's a bonus added piece of content for people if they do lose or do draw in a funny way. But if they do win, it's almost wiped off the face of the earth.
Exactly.
Which I think most people can relate to.
We will make no reference to it whatsoever because we don't believe in that. It's sort of like hiding under the bed covers from a monster. If you can't see the monster can't see you. That's exactly where we are with this. Is it silly? Is it juvenile? Perhaps, but that's our commitment. And generally speaking, we will take a relatively lighthearted view of the Premier League action. Obviously, there are serious topics, and serious topics happen within the Premier League, and serious things to discuss. We don't shy away from those, but as is the sort of Arseblog theme in general, we're not going to take everything too seriously. All of this shit is out of our hands, out of our control, and all we can do is react to what other clubs do and what happens in the Premier League that weekend. So there's always stuff. Stuff happens, memes happen, little audio clips happen. Someone will say something in a post-game interview that's worth, snipping out and then using over the course of the season. We have those things. And Every Monday, basically, unless there's a Monday night football game that's worth it, we will have this podcast for you. So on top of the Arsecast Extra on a Monday, if you are an Arseblog member on Patreon, you also get this podcast. So there you go. There's our sales pitch to the people. Anything you want to add before we start to talk about what's happened this summer and look at some of the teams?
Not really. I mean, I think it is important to stress that we do take a lighthearted look at stuff and we'll have a joke about things, but we do also talk about stuff that's important. So refereeing decisions, racism, violent conduct, all of this kind of goes into our remit. So I think it's you get the funny side, but you also get the serious side as well, which is good. And what I love actually about the 30 is how engaged people are. It's really nice to have built a sort of community of ultras in terms of this podcast because they're always there, they're always commenting. We get a nice discussion going on Discord as well, which I really enjoy. It's actually one of the things I really love about doing the Patreon stuff on the Arseblog side of things because people are so engaged and I love it. So hopefully we can get some new people on board this year.
Yeah, hopefully so. So let's start, I think, by looking at what we might consider the rivals to Arsenal this season. And we can do some quick predictions a bit later on. We can talk about the top 4, the bottom 3, some individual bits and pieces as well. But I think when we're looking ahead to the season, we all at this point understand what Arsenal have done in the transfer market. and there are things that we hope Arsenal might still do in the transfer market. But I think we have to look at the other teams, and I suppose we should start with Liverpool, and they've bought well, I think it's fair to say. They've also sold really, really well. So when I do figures in this particular section of the podcast, I'm taking the figures that were posted on the Sky Sports website. So if you go for a list of summer transfers, Sky Sports will bring you up what each club has spent, or what, the players they brought in and the players that they've sold. So my sort of calculations, I was going to say back of a matchbook, but I didn't use a matchbook. I used a fucking calculator on my phone. Primarily because I don't have a matchbook. I have no need for matches in my office. Anyway, Liverpool have spent £293 million this summer, which is kind of extraordinary. The players that they've brought in, of course, Milos Kerkez from Bournemouth, Florian Wirtz, Jeremy Frimpong, the goalkeeper, whose name I should have practiced before I came on. Do you have it? Mamardashvili. That's the guy. Yes. Hugo Ekitike from Eintracht Frankfurt. So between all of those incomings, they've spent £293 million, according to Sky Sports. On the other hand, they've also brought in basically £200 million. Darwin Nunez, nothing dodgy about that one, £56 million to Al Hilal, Trent Alexander-Arnold, Caoimhín Kelleher, Gerald Quansah and Luis Diaz, and some dude called Tyler Morton, who I'd never heard of, that they still managed to get £15 million for, which is I don't know how Liverpool keep doing it, but they keep doing it. So how do you view their business incoming and outgoing with the, I suppose, Alexander Isak-shaped elephant in the room as well?
Oh, that's a hefty elephant as well, I'd say, because I'm going to talk about him first, because I think we can address their business in general, but I still think they'll get Isak done. As we're sitting here on the 12th of August recording, I think he'll be a Liverpool player by the end of the window, because he's doing a Gyökeres and really forcing things through. There was an Orm bomb this morning saying that he's adamant he won't play for Newcastle again. There's no desire to reintegrate to the squad. I think there was another silly report that he'd moved out of his house today. This is only going one way. And it basically means pay up and we'll let him go. And I know there was the £110 million bid earlier in the window, which was rejected out of hand. And as it should be, by the way, because 110 million is kind of stupid for Alexander Isak, even though it is technically a British transfer record, or could end up being a British transfer record. But Newcastle have leverage here. There's 3 years left on his deal. They could always call his bluff and keep him. We've seen this happen before with Luis Suarez, Moises Caicedo, even Harry Kane, where they make the big song and dance about leaving, and then they're eventually brought back into the squad. They play nice for a year, and then they go the following season. So that's an option. I don't think it will happen. I think if Liverpool get close to £140 million-ish, they'll get him. It's just a waiting game now. It's Isak and his people in one corner. There's Newcastle in another corner, Liverpool in another corner. They've all got a save face somehow. They've all got to think about how they're posturing to the public. I think it will get done. But as usual, a lot of good business being done either way, ins and outs for Liverpool. Do you have a stance on the Isak thing? Do you think it will happen?
I think it will. I don't think he's taking this stance without some real reassurance from Liverpool that they will do what it takes to get the deal done, because he's basically burned his bridges. It's not impossible when a player does this to sort of go back and eat some humble pie, but ultimately you've got a player who does not want to be at your club on your hands. An unhappy guy creates an unhappy environment. Would I be sad if that was the case? Absolutely not. Like if he stayed at Newcastle and was miserable, and the Newcastle fans were having spent a week coding him off, and Liverpool fans excusing his behavior all over the place, which is quite funny as well. They get mad at Trent Alexander-Arnold for, respecting his contract and then going to join one of the biggest clubs in the world, if not the biggest club in the world. They go mad at Trent, boo Trent for that. But, they'll be like, oh, Alexander Isak, he really wants to come to us. What a guy. The sort of inherent hypocrisy of football fans is evident over the course of this summer. I think it's a similar thing for us with Gyökeres. I don't think this was quite as What's the word I'm looking for here? I don't think Gyökeres was as disrespectful to Sporting as Isak is being to Newcastle. Certainly, there appeared to have been some agreement with Sporting. It just was about the framework of that. But look, we all want the player to come to our club. I think he will end up there, and I frankly find it quite scary that they might have that kind of firepower at their disposal with Mo Salah, with Ekitike, with Alexander Isak, with Florian Wirtz, other good players, Szoboszlai, Alexis McAllister. You know, they're going all in on the attack, I think, Liverpool. You might ask some questions about their defence, but I think you can live with a slightly iffy defence if you've got the ability to rip teams apart the way they might, you know? So, yeah, it is a huge investment as well, isn't it? When you think about it, that kind of money, FSG have not normally been that kind of big spender, but I suppose when you do have some connections to Saudi Arabia and they can offset some of your spending, it makes it a little bit easier.
It does make things easier, and also Liverpool haven't really spent that much at all over the last 2 seasons. So these funds will have been building up in the background quietly. They've obviously got Champions League money. They've got the Premier League winners' money coming in as well. They sell well. So it didn't really surprise me that they went all out this summer, but I have to say I didn't expect them to be this aggressive. And even when they signed Ekitike, I thought that would be it for their Isak pursuit because they're very similar players. It's a bit strange to sign Ekitike and then sort of ship him out to the left if Isak does eventually sign. But I guess the way they're looking at it is he is the best striker on the market, and do we want to risk him going elsewhere next summer? I think Barcelona could be in play next year. Potentially PSG could be in play. Maybe even Arsenal. Who knows? So I think this is a kind of now or never thing for them. And they've got the funds to do it. So, yeah, I think that'll get done. I mean, Arne Slot did a great job balancing the side last season. I think they repurposed Gravenberch after Zubimendi rejected them. But as good as they were, Salah had a freak season and played 37 games. Virgil van Dijk had another freak season and played 37 games. You know, if that happens again, then fair enough. But now I think there's an onus on Slot to truly print yourself on the side and your values and your principles after taking the skeleton of Jurgen Klopp's team. And that's what I'm interested in watching, because I would probably put them favourites again at this point, but I don't think they were challenged enough last year. And this won't be groundbreaking analysis, but I am looking at them defensively. And I think they could be vulnerable, especially in wide areas. Replacing Trent and Robertson was never going to be easy. And they've gone, obviously, for Jeremy Frimpong on the right side, Milos Kerkez on the left. That is very attacking, very forward-thinking. It's also quite small. And there will be spaces. I mean, we even saw it in the Community Shield on Sunday. How many times were Palace able to get in behind Kerkez in particular, with Sarr running down that side, Munoz running down that side? It was a clear plan for them on the day. And they'll need to find that balance again, which is entirely normal. New players need time to adjust. But you do look at some of the attacking firepower and you think Florian Wirtz, young player in the Bundesliga, young player of the season in the Bundesliga, so elegant, graceful, tricky, can play left, can play central, is so good in those half spaces, scores a lot of goals, gets a lot of assists. Hugo Ekitike as well scored a lot of goals in the Bundesliga last year for Eintracht Frankfurt, has sort of found his feet again after being lost in the shadows a little bit at PSG. He sort of found his love for the game, for football again at Eintracht, which is, you know, a thing that they do. They are like compound V for strikers. They just find a way to get them fit and firing again, and they can score a million goals there. You know, Cody Gakpo's already there. Salah, I've got no doubt that he'll score 20 goals again this year because that's what he does. So there's just a lot of ability and pace and firepower and goals in that team. And you think there are issues defensively, but if they score 4 goals every game, conceding 2 doesn't really matter. And it's very Liverpool. That's very Liverpool to be able to do that. And I know they were so good defensively under Jurgen Klopp, actually. One of their best teams when they won the league was I think it was 1920, during the COVID pandemic, or just the start of the COVID pandemic. They were unbelievable defensively. So I don't think they really care. And it is a bit worrying to see them be the best team in the league attacking wise last year and then say, okay, we're going to sell Luis Diaz and a couple of other people who were important for us and just upgrade on them again.
Yes.
So I am curious to see how they get on, because there's a lot of change happening. Obviously, Darwin's going out. Diaz has gone out. The tragic passing of Jota means that he won't be there, obviously. So there is a lot of things to balance here, but on paper, it's frightening.
Yeah,
it's really, really frightening. And I think we need to... Obviously, we can't do anything about it because it's the rest of the league's responsibility as well. But we need to maybe accept that even though we want to see ourselves a bit more like Liverpool, we won't be there, and maybe lean into what makes us a good team, which is sort of being a bit more balanced and defensively strong. Whereas Liverpool, I think, are just going to be like, okay, goals, attack. How many can we score per game? Yeah. This is going to be us this year. So, really interesting to see how they get on. Yeah,
I think so. I think the question about the defensive solidity is an interesting one. Van Dijk not getting any younger, of course, and the two changes at fullback. Like, I think people underestimate just how good and consistent Alexander-Arnold and Robertson have been for Liverpool over the last number of years. And I like Kirkez. I think he's been very, very impressive at Bournemouth. And Frimpong, a very good player as well. But let's see how it all plays out. If they do get Isak, I don't think there's any doubt that Liverpool are, by some distance, the favourites for the Premier League. That remains to be seen, but hopefully it is a long, protracted, drawn-out, miserable experience for all concerned that has an impact on the way that they play. Let's talk Manchester City. Money spent, 160 million. They brought in Baby Reindeer, Ryan Ait-Nouri, Ryan Cherky from Lyon, Sfera Naipan from Rosenborg, a player that Arsenal were reportedly interested in back in January, and James Trafford, a goalkeeper they brought in from Burnley, who they used to own him, and then they sold him to Burnley, and then he's come back for 31 million after having an unconvincing first Premier League season with Burnley, and obviously did a bit better last time with them in the Championship. They've come back up. They've only sold one player, and that's Kyle Walker to Burnley for 5 million. So the differential, or the price, net spend, if you want to call it that, is 155 million. I'm really interested in this because Pep Guardiola has never had to do a rebuild. He's never been anywhere long enough where he's had to properly rebuild a team and rebuild a squad. I guess when you win 4 Premier Leagues in a row, you get the license to do that, even if you have an off season, which they did. But I am curious to see what the motivation is like again. Does he feel refreshed? Does he feel up for going for it again and putting in all those hard yards, if you like, on the training ground, and that intensity that he has as a manager, with a new group of players? Because I think, I don't want to say it was the old reliables, but there was a lot of familiar faces. There were a lot of familiar faces in those Man City teams that won the league for those 4 successive years. Can he then shape it into something new that can compete?
Yeah, I have absolutely no idea what to make of City this year. And also, I felt like I haven't seen them in pre-season at all. I know they were in the Club World Cup, but usually some clips or goals pop up at some point, extended highlights, and I haven't seen a single thing. So is that intentional? I don't know. Maybe they're just giving their guys the appropriate amount of rest, which is good. Although I did check earlier and they beat Palermo 3-0. So that's it. But yeah, this was a team in need of surgery. Although most of their January signings haven't worked out, apart from Marmoush, who I think was good when he came in January, but Kusanov, nowhere to be seen. Vitor Reis has gone out on loan to Girona. They did a great job securing him or selling him to themselves, basically. Yeah. Nico Gonzalez is already being linked with an exit after joining in January from Porto. So it's definitely an ongoing process. I mean, Kevin De Bruyne has gone, Kyle Walker's gone. So there's change happening here. And
Scott Carson has gone as well after 50 years at Man City as their third choice goalkeeper. Scott Carson has finally left.
Best job in the world. Yeah. So I'm looking at 2 signings in particular. You mentioned one, Tijani Reinders. He has been one of the standout midfielders in Serie A. Almost Gundogan-esque in his profile, box to box, with a good goal threat, nice feet in the area. He can sort of break in transition as well, comfortable on the ball in all phases. But Ryan Cherky as well. I mean, I've known about him since he was 17 when I used to watch a lot of youth football. Unfortunately, I can't do it so much anymore, but he was just so obviously going to be good the way I saw him in the UEFA Youth Leagues, at various under-17 championships and under-19 championships. He's got this incredible ability to be good on both feet. He looks so natural. He's skillful. He's got vision, flair, a real throwback actually to a time where, you know, playmakers and these sorts of number 10s were a thing, but they sort of went out of fashion a little bit. And he's just come back and sort of said, well, I'm here and I can play wide and I can play central and I can give you some X factor. And he's just so much fun. I'm quite sad to see him there because Pep maybe has a reputation for killing these sorts of players, or not killing them, but finding a way to put them in his image, which maybe isn't so jazz and improvisey. It's more, you're going to be part of a system here. And I think you can see that with Jack Grealish as well. But I don't know if they're weaker. I don't know if they're stronger. I mean, obviously, the main topic now is Jack Grealish is going to Everton on loan. McAtee is going to Nottingham Forest. And Savinho could potentially be going to Spurs. So that means one thing to me, and it's going there. They're going to go big. They're going to go big for another winger. And I've got a feeling it's Rodrigo.
Yeah, there's been talk this week about their interest in Rodrigo. It feels like a very Manchester City deal to do. I know this is a name, and we'll probably talk about somebody else. We mentioned we don't really talk about Spurs, and we won't, but we can talk about a player who's been linked with Spurs that I think will agitate Arsenal fans a little bit, given some of the mentions this season. But Rodrigo is a player that had been mentioned in relation to Arsenal. It feels like a very City deal to do simply because it's going to be really expensive. I think it's probably going to be 80, 90 million euros thereabouts. And Arsenal, as we've seen, have spent about 190 million pounds this summer and only brought in about 4.5 at this point. And that was Nuno Tavares being sold to Lazio. So there is a gap there in terms of our net spend. But what City can do and what they have done consistently is pay the wages that these big players want. You know, the Haaland transfer, for example, was not an outrageously expensive transfer, but although we don't know the full details, you can be quite sure that the package that Erling Haaland is on is basically beyond what most clubs could ever have paid or could pay at that point. You know, so that strikes me as something that Man City do on the regular. Rodrigo, coming from Real Madrid at 24, is going to say, I want 250, 300, 350, which I think is probably out of reach of Arsenal and probably most other clubs at this point, but not City, because they have a way of just throwing money around, and, well, it doesn't seem to make any difference what they do or who looks at it and how long they look at it. They can just keep doing it.
Yeah, it's pretty mad, isn't it, that we still don't have a resolution in terms of their 115 charges. But on the pitch, they can't go short, or they can't go into the season short in the wide areas because they're so important under Pep. And I know Oscar Bob is coming back. Pep likes him. He can play on the right, but it's not enough. So they'll dip into the market for sure. And Rodrigo ticks the boxes because he's versatile. He's at a good age. There's been previous contact before with Pep. He likes him. So I would be quite surprised if all of those three players go out and then Rodrigo doesn't come in, to be honest. And there's also been change at boardroom level, executive level. Obviously, Hugo Viana has come in from Sporting. He's replacing Pep's mate Chiki Begiristain. So that's an interesting one. He's been kind of a key figure for them over the past decade. They work very closely together with Pep. Obviously, there's that Barcelona connection as well. So I'm not so hot on them. I have to say, it's just a feeling I've got. I'm sure they'll be good and up there and close to us wherever we finish, but they don't give me at the moment that sense of inevitability, you know, which is something that's terrified me over the years with City, with Gundogan scoring in title runs, Kevin De Bruyne just finding a way to score or assist from nowhere, Haaland scoring, Foden popping up with something, and they've got an incredible defence that has sort of aged out a little bit. John Stones is not really fit and firing like he was. I know Ruben Diaz is still there, but there's been a lot of change at fullback. So in midfield, Rodri's had a setback. You know, I think they're in transition. and I still think they'll be good, but I don't get I don't get that feeling of it where there's just this existential dread that whatever you do, City will just match it or go one more. Yeah. So maybe that's a window for us. Maybe it's a window for some other teams we'll talk about, maybe even Liverpool. But I think they'll be good. I like some of the players they've brought in, but this is very much a transition year for me. And I think there might be a way in for some teams to kind of close the gap, which is interesting. And also I could sit here in 9 months and look like an idiot, which is entirely possible, but and not totally out of the ordinary. But yeah, it's just a feeling that I have about them that I think they'll need a bit of time to get it right. Yeah,
maybe so. Look, there's still a couple of weeks left in the window, and they might push again because that is what they do and pretty much always have done. And Pep, he does like to spend. There's no question about that. Let's talk about Man United, who I think are really, really interesting. Because one of the big problems they had last season was a forward line that was absolutely crap. It was complete garbage. Højlund, Xerxes, whoever else they had at that point. I can't even remember who they were playing with half the time. They've completely and utterly revamped that front three, I guess. Maybe not the front three per se, but, they brought in Benjamin Sesko, a player Arsenal were linked with. They brought in Brian Mbomo, who's a really, really good player who impressed us, a lot at Brentford when we talked about them last season. Mateus Cunha from Wolves, a very, very interesting player, someone we were linked with in January, rather. I'm not sure there was anything really, really close in that regard, but certainly a player that Arsenal were looking at. So they have added quality. There's talk of Garnacho leaving. There's talk of Anthony leaving. Like Anthony has been told, apparently, if you don't accept one of these loan deals, you're just going to sit in the stands. He had a decent time at Betis, I think. But they look like they're addressing some of those particular issues. Whether they have what it takes at the back and certainly in goal, there's another question. But as a way of sort of getting your fans excited, bringing in three, I guess on paper, good quality attacking signings will certainly give the Manchester United fans some optimism. They had a terrible season last season. I don't think they can be that bad again by any way. I just don't think so. And I think Amorim, despite the fact it took him it's still taking him time to really implement himself at that club. I think this is where I'm really curious about what we see from United. Can he do that now this season? He didn't really do it last season. He had lots of time, and other managers, as we said, have come into a football club and changed the style and changed the tactics and been effective in a way that he really wasn't last season. But I still think he's a good coach and could take United in a different direction this season. So what's your take on what they've done so far? Their net spend, they've spent £214 million. They haven't sold anybody yet. And there's still talk about them going after Carlos Baleba, for example, at Brighton, who's a good player. I saw a £100 million plus price tag going with that. So I don't really understand how Manchester United could possibly afford that with all the rules and regulations that are in place. But, clubs don't really seem to give a fuck about that these days. So what's your take on United as they stand right now?
Yeah, they're going to have Baleba working in the canteen at this point to help make up some of the staffing issues. Yeah, I'm going to be very careful about what I say here because I've got no interest in jinxing our first game of the season. But surely things can't be as bad as they were last time around. No. I mean, they started the season with Erik ten Hag because they couldn't find anyone who wanted to join after they won the FA Cup. Things went from bad to worse, and then that mess of a squad, that mess of a manager were exposed, and then things didn't really improve under Ruben Amorim, whose efforts to try and implement a new system was like teaching Mandarin to a bunch of monkeys. It just wasn't working. They looked so clueless and confused every time they were playing. So, and that losing that pathetic excuse of a Europa League final just summed them up, really. But they've spent more money than I thought they would or could this summer. And like you said, they could be still going in for Baleba. Even Donnarumma's been mentioned, weirdly enough, and with City, which I don't get because he's like the antithesis of what Pep wants in goal. But it's quite clear. Mateus Cunha and Brian Mbeumo were two of the best players in England last season, and undoubtedly improved them in attack. I want to see if they can maintain their ridiculous finishing streaks, because they were the two biggest XG overperformers in the Premier League last year. So maybe they might revert to the mean a little bit. Obviously, I think Mbeumo was the biggest XG overperformer in Europe. So, and that's not taking anything away from his quality or how well he did at Brentford last year. It's just a fact. So they will improve. I would be amazed if they finish 16th again. They managed to get Sesko over the line as well, so he'll give their front line some added threat, because Højlund looks like he's being forced out as well. Maybe AC Milan on loan has been the talk. Joshua Zirkzee, I think Amorim's given up on him being a centre forward. I've seen ships move quicker in the Suez Canal. To be honest, I think he's useless. So again, it goes back to, yes, you've improved your attack, but there's the rest of the team that you need to figure out. And I just think there's so many issues defensively, and Bruno Fernandes aside in midfield, they've got no real penetration from those areas. Although Kobe Mainu, Mason Mount can be decent on their day, but it's just not the same. Casemiro's finished. They've got Ugarte in there, who's just a glorified shin kicker. So I think they've got a real lack of quality in central areas, and also in defence. They could be without Lisandro Martinez for a little bit longer. So there's talk of Luke Shaw being the outside centre-back. De Ligt, again, fine, but nothing crazy. Lenny Yoro's still finding his feet. So, yes, they've absolutely improved in attacking areas, which they needed to do, but I'm looking at them again defensively and thinking this is going to take, A, more time, and B, more money to fix, because I don't rate the individual talent, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, Harry Maguire and Andre Onana, what a combination. Like you, I don't want to jinx anything too much ahead of our first game of the season, but, whatever you pour into your... Liverpool have poured or will pour a lot into attack, on the basis that they've had this excellent defence, one of the best goalkeepers in the world in Alisson, and a very, very, very good partnership between Van Dijk and Konate. There's no two ways about that, with two really good fullbacks either side of them. So they poured their attacking money on top of what I think is already a decent platform, or certainly was a decent platform, even if you've changed up both fullbacks. But United's defensive platform is non-existent, so they can focus on the forwards, but if you're porous at the back, which I hope they will be, and I hope they are on Sunday, obviously, it becomes a bit more difficult. Right, let's go to Chelsea. Chelsea have bought a lot of players, because that's what Chelsea do. £256 million spent in the market so far. They have, to be fair though, recouped 154 million, with some sales. Nani Madueke, principal among those, to Arsenal. We hope he does really well, but a dodgy one, João Felix to Al Nassr. How they... Listen, I don't even want to go there. I think we all understand that there are things at play that we can't speak out loud, but that we all suspect very, very strongly. So their net spend, I guess, is in the region of 102 million pounds. Last season, I think what's interesting about Chelsea, last season they had a first team squad and then a shadow squad for their European games, because they were in the Europa Conference League. And even with some fringe players, those players were essentially too good for everybody in that competition. They finished fourth, and I think in part because they were able to keep players fresh and fit and ready for the weekend in the Premier League. They now have to contend with proper, in inverted commas, European football. Is that going to be the big challenge for Chelsea? Again, they have a very, very deep squad. They've bought some good players, but the challenge for Chelsea and Enzo Maresca will be having to deal with proper midweek games where you don't get the opportunity, or the luxury, if you want to put it that way rather, of resting all your best players.
Yeah, definitely. It's the obvious one for me. I think they were in a very fortunate position last year because, like you said, even their second or third choice team was still miles better than anyone else in that competition. So they did have that luxury of ultimately playing once a week in the Premier League. They were keeping people fresh. I mean, Cole Palmer wasn't even included in the group stage Conference League squad. So that just shows you that, you know, they took it as a joke. I mean, it's always difficult to judge Chelsea simply because their player turnover is so big every season. They'll buy 10 players, they'll sell 10 players. So you always have to consider how they will fit in, what system they decide to play, whether or not it will be different to how they played the season before. But I think, annoyingly, they're going into the season in good shape after winning the Club World Cup, obviously, as well, the Conference League. They seem to have figured things out under Enzo Maresca, and they started well last year as well. It was only in February, March time where they started to slip away. You saw some of the inexperience in their squad. They couldn't handle some of the big games and the pressure that came with that. So there's definitely an element of a broken clock being right twice a day to their transfer business. I think it's very scattergun, but if you buy enough good young talent, a few of them will eventually become good. And I'm quite sad because they have signed a few players that I like. Obviously, Jamie Gittins is a really fun winger. Joel Hato, someone that Arsenal have followed for a long time. I thought he would have been a really good signing for us. Joao Pedro has hit the ground running there. Estevao as well, one of the standout talents in Brazil. So they're doing this thing where they're just hoarding talent. And eventually that will work in your favour. They've already got a good squad there that will be a bit more familiar with each other. Something I am keeping an eye on as well, not just their Champions League exploits, but the injury situation. Because I know they've got a huge squad, but some of those guys played 65, 70 games last season because of the Club World Cup as well, which extended things for another month. And I think that will have an effect down the line. They've already lost Levi Colwill for the season. He did his ACL in training, which can happen. It could be like a freak injury and no connection to the Club World Cup at all. But it does seem it's a bit of a coincidence. And I know James Maddison did his one in pre-season and then Spurs went in the Club World Cup. But I will be watching that closely. I think as well, especially when you've got injury-prone players occasionally, like Reece James, can their bodies hold up? That's what I'll be looking at. Can they go the distance at full pelt twice a week? Because it's a young squad. It's a very young squad still, and this is going to be a lot of pressure on them now. Some people are even talking about them for the title. So they'll be up there. I don't know if I'm going to put them in the Liverpool, Arsenal, City trifecta yet, but they'll certainly be up there, and they're a threat. They've got a lot of pace going forward. So it's just really annoying that we keep giving them money. And I'm not just saying we in terms of Arsenal, I mean everybody. And we'll get onto them later. But, for example, Kiernan Dewsbury Hall going to Everton, 30 million. How? Armando Broja, he's missed 80 games in the last 3 seasons. 20 million. How? You know, so it's just an incredible skill to have, and Liverpool have it as well, where they just find fees for their players. So I would love to be able to take a leaf out of their book. But yeah, Chelsea, an interesting one, certainly talented, but a few things to watch out for. Some banana skins for sure. I'm
not 100% convinced by them defensively. You know, they do have a lot of attacking talent, a lot of good midfield talent. Defensively, I'm not 100% sure. I mean, they've got loads of players back there. I'm just looking at their squad on Transfermarkt, and it's like, oh, you've got 6 centre backs and 5 right backs, and you know, so it's not that they're short of options, but I just don't know that they've got the kind of quality that you need to win a Premier League title. So we'll see, and I guess, you know, there's every chance between now and the end of the window that they spend again and bring in more players, because it's just what they do. I want to talk about some other clubs as well. Let's talk about Crystal Palace for a second, because I do wonder if there must be something enjoyably frustrating about being a Crystal Palace fan at the moment. You win a trophy in May. You've won the Community Shield. But then there is this issue with Europe. That is, in some ways, their fault, because they didn't abide by the rules. They didn't check their emails, and therefore, which is completely dumb. But then on the flip side of that, there are other clubs involved in multi-club ownership, you know, who are allowed play in the same European competitions because they haven't engaged in this sort of arbitrary blind trust nonsense that UEFA have cooked up to allow clubs with the same owners or in multi-club models to play together. It does seem a little bit unfair. Nottingham Forest, by the way, the biggest snitches in the Premier League. But they haven't really done anything in the market this summer. Mark Gahey could leave. He's got a year left on his contract. Eberechi is a player who Arsenal have been linked with. I think primarily that interest was there before Ethan Nwaneri signed his new contract, and that might tell you something about that situation and might tell you something about whether Arsenal are really interested now or not. He's being linked with Spurs, which is annoying. Can I ask you, like, if Eze was being linked with Aston Villa or being linked with Bournemouth or Brighton or something, you wouldn't feel the same way about it, would you? Even if you like Eze, and I do, and I'd love to see him, in red and white. I think he'd be a really fun player. If he went somewhere else, I'd be like, yeah, I can see why, because there isn't really the room in the squad for him at this moment in time at Arsenal. But there's another part of you that goes, don't let him go there. Don't retire from football at such a young age. You want to kind of rescue him, and he's got Arsenal history. He grew up at Arsenal. And you're sort of like, we can't let that. We've got a duty of care to this young man to rescue him from ruining what's left of his career. So it is more or less that Tottenham thing. So let's hear what you've got on Eze and then Crystal Palace, because Oliver Glasner has done such a good job there. He must be at his wit's end with what's going on with the squad, the lack of investment, the lack of, building on what he has done there. He must be so frustrated with the way Palace is being run at this moment in time.
Yeah, Oliver Glasner has done a superb job. And maybe there's a hot take in there about him later on towards the end of the podcast. But yeah, anyone who's listened to this podcast will know how much I love him, how much we love him. Every week there seems to be a bit of skill or an assist or a goal, and we're just sitting here going, that would be fun at Arsenal. That would be fun at Arsenal. I'll take him at Arsenal. And we're just sort of sitting there waxing lyrical about him, drooling and daydreaming. But you're right to say that he's not a natural fit in the squad, but I still think he could bring immense value to it. I think he's more than capable on the left. I think he gives us a lot in central areas where I think our attack has faltered at times. So to see him, like you said, I'd be able to accept it if he went elsewhere, to a City, to a whoever else, a Chelsea maybe, even though that would make me a bit sick as well. But there's just a feeling about Spurs, and when Maddison went down, I thought, there's a space for him here that maybe wasn't there before. And I tried to be a bit nonchalant about it and say, Bilal El Khanous would be a nice fit for Spurs, but Eze was always in the back of my mind, and that seems to have been accelerated over the last 48 hours in particular. They've obviously spoken to him and his people. So it would be a huge shame, because I think there's a lovely story there. I think we need more technicians at the carpet. I think we could do great things with a player like him at the club in terms of his ball carrying ability, his ability to shift and shoot, his quick feet in wide areas, his combination play. I think he's just a lovely player to watch. But maybe Arsenal have something else up their sleeve. Maybe they need to wait for some dominoes to fall in terms of departures. Either way, it does seem to have died down a little bit, which is a shame. So, look, I like Thomas Frank, and now he's retired. So if Eze wants to take that same route, he can do it. He's just dead to me thereafter and won't be on my Christmas card list. So,
no, exactly. Yeah. Going to cross him off that one for sure. Let's talk about a team that sold really well, who had a really good season last season. They just sort of fell away towards the end of the campaign, but Anthony Iraola was very good and did a great job at Bournemouth last season. But they've sold Dean Howson to Real Madrid, Milos Kerkez to Liverpool, Ilya Zabarny to PSG now. But they've brought in quite a lot of money. Jadon Anthony went to Burnley for 10 million. So you're looking at 150 odd million, 155 million from a Bournemouth perspective, which is big money for a club like that. They've only brought in a couple of players, a guy from France, and they've brought in a goalkeeper who I think is way too expensive from Chelsea, but that's another one of those. How the fuck did Chelsea get that kind of money for that goalkeeper?
I think they've got Darren Brown in the negotiation room, just like flicking a watch saying, you will give me £25 million, you will give me £25 million. And then like, how about we give £25 million? Deal. Right.
Okay, yeah, you're done. Okay. That would explain it. I mean, that sounds absurd, but also perfectly reasonable as well. But there's scope, obviously, for Bournemouth to go out and buy a few players. They're going to need to buy a few players, a few defenders, I think, but probably need to add something to their attacking lineup as well. They will have money at their disposal.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a big shame for a club like Bournemouth because you feel like you do all of this scouting, you get a good team together, they play really well in the Premier League, they have one season together, and then all of a sudden, 4 of them are gone, or 3 of them are gone, and you have to rebuild again. But I think it's a huge credit to them, their recruitment team, also Andoni Iraola as a coach, to have been able to improve these guys. I mean, obviously they were talented when they came into the club, but obviously you have to take a punt on people. And Milos Kerkez was in the Eredivisie with AZ Alkmaar. You know, Ilya Zabani was playing for Dynamo Kiev. So they weren't, slam dunk signings by any means. No. Obviously, Dean Howson as well was at Juventus, where they were happy to ship him out for PSR reasons or whatever their financial situation is. So these were no guarantees, and they managed to turn into a really good Premier League squad last year. I think they've got Bafode Diakite coming in from Lille as well, who's a good player. He was actually on my radar as a kind of centre-back, right-back replacement for Tomiyasu a couple of years ago when it became clear that he wasn't really going to be fit enough to be able to maintain a role in this squad. But they've spent quite a bit on him. I think it was 35 million euros. So it's a heavy deal. Their second most expensive signing ever behind Evan Nielsen. But at this point now, if you're going to build, you need to spend a little bit. So I think there will be scope for them to spend a little bit more towards the end of the window. I think Dango Ouattara might leave to go to Brentford, so that could be another 20-ish million in the coffer for them to go out and get another forward. So they've managed to sign Semenyo, who was obviously one of the main candidates for an exit this summer. So I really hope that it doesn't derail them too much because I really like the manager. I think they did a great job last season. And for a club that nearly went out of business 16 years ago, I think they would much rather be selling 3 players for 150 million than being a bit upset that they're not able to build on last year. So they'll just go again. They've got a good team there behind the scenes, finding players all the time. So, really, really happy for them. And they're just a team that I have a lot of respect for in the Premier League because I think they do stuff well. All
right. Speaking of teams you have a lot of respect for, let's talk a little bit about Newcastle. There's my gag. But why don't we talk about Newcastle and talk about Aston Villa in the same breath as well, because there's a bit of a transfer story involving Jacob Ramsey going maybe from Aston Villa to Newcastle. Newcastle have had a frustrating window, I think you would say. Obviously, the Isak thing is a big issue for them. Anthony Elanga is the only player that they've brought in. Aston Villa relatively quiet as well. They brought in a forward from Nice, I think it is, but they haven't really spent a great deal of money either. Are those two sides without a bit more investment going to struggle to, not to finish top 10, but to really push for the European places?
Yeah, ultimately they're being strung or hamstrung by financial issues, right? I think it was obvious last year that Villa were very close to breaking some rules. I mean, their wages to turnover ratio was like 96% or something stupid like that. So they really gambled in January with a few loanees. They brought in Marco Asensio, they brought in Rashford. Obviously, they sold John Duran and then went all in on Watkins. So it was clear that they were very or needing to tread carefully around this stuff. But unfortunately, they couldn't get over the line with Champions League football. They sort of bottled it a little bit towards the end of the year, but also they had a shocker against United on the last game of the season where that ridiculous goal was ruled out, and it's obviously had a big effect on them now. Look, they still did an amazing job to finish 6th. I think this squad is a good squad, but Emery has shown again that he's kind of the perfect man for this team in that they're a big club, but still quite underdoggy, and I think that's the the perfect place for him. I don't know if I would trust him at an elite side, but this is kind of perfect territory for him. Evan Guesson, good player, played very well in France last year, but I just look at them and think they will be between 6th and 8th, but whether or not they have enough to go further is my question. And also I think defensively they're not overly convincing with that high line, is what I would say. And I know it's how they want to play, it's how they choose to play, and it's fine. But yeah, I just think defensively they can be a little bit weak, even though they have a lot of talent in attacking areas. So that's them. Newcastle, this is an all-time stinker of a window. I mean, they missed out on Joao Pedro, they missed out on Ekitike, they missed out on Trafford.
Sesko.
Obviously, Sesko as well. They were looking at Samu Agehawa from Porto, and that seems to have died down. Wissa can't get out of Brentford. So it's just like every player they seem to be chasing is not joining them. So at some point, they need to find a way to get a signing over the line. I don't know if the Isak thing is sort of derailing that as well a little bit, because is he staying? Is he going? They don't know how much money they're going to have to work with eventually. So it's just been a really, really awful summer. Their sporting directors left the club. Obviously, Dan Ashworth left the club as well. There's a weird power dynamic with Eddie Howe and his brother in terms of the recruitment there. So it's just a really strange situation. They keep crying PSR issues, and I'm entirely accepting that they are in a sticky situation there, but also I don't think they've spent that well over the years. I think they've brought in some good players, but also I see some players there that haven't really added much value. I think they needed to strengthen, particularly in central defence, for a long time now, and they haven't really done it. So it's just a really difficult position to be in for them, and it's a shame because they would have been sold all these dreams when the new ownership came in. Mike Ashley went out. They're going to be the richest club in the world. We're going to spend billions like City did and PSG did and all of these teams did. But it hasn't quite worked out that way. And it shows you that still, even if you do have money, being able to attract people is something else altogether. And, being big dogged by United for Šeško, Chelsea for Joao Pedro, it just leaves a bit of a sour taste. So it has been a bit of a reality check when, in theory, winning your first piece of silverware for how many years with all these good players at the club should have been a springboard. They seem to have gone back quite considerably, which I will not be shedding a tear about.
No, not at all. I think it was always going to be a big challenge for Newcastle, despite the money at their disposal or the funds from the ownership at their disposal, just to sell Newcastle as a destination for top footballers. And that's not being disrespectful to the city, but if you have your choice between London or Manchester in the Premier League or even Liverpool, that's where you're going to go rather than the Northeast. So I really do hope that they continue to struggle. They've brought in Aaron Ramsdale, of course. He's back in the Premier League. And, listen, I like Aaron. He's a good guy. But if he can carry on this sequence of relegations, I will put him on my Christmas card list with a little gift basket of nice biscuits as well. So we'll see what happens there. Let's do a few quick things to sort of finish us off here. One of the things we talked about quite a lot last season on the podcast was the fact that the three promoted teams were the three teams that were very, very obviously going to get relegated from pretty much early on. How do you feel about the teams that have come up this time around? Do you feel that the one or two of them might buck the trend a little bit? Is there potential room maybe for one or two teams who are established in the Premier League to sort of fall away and end up in that relegation battle? It's Leeds, it's Burnley, and it's Sunderland. Granit Xhaka, of course, back in the Premier League with Sunderland. I did like the see the video that he did with Sunderland.
The one-word response.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. when I think of Sunderland, I think amazing.
Let me just get my thesaurus out.
Yeah.
Who are you most excited to play with?
Everybody.
Yeah. He hasn't seen the updated squad list for the year.
No, obviously. He hasn't. But listen, good luck to him. But what do you make of the promoted teams? Would it be a good thing? I think personally it would, if at least one of those teams could demonstrate that the promoted teams from the Championship have the ability to come into the Premier League and compete, because it feels like more and more it's like 3 go up and the 3 go down again, and the only change is like whoever comes up from the Championship.
Yeah, I don't know if there's an immediate contender for a team that could buck the trend. I think they're all going about it quite differently in terms of their transfer business, which is interesting. And there are certainly a couple of Premier League teams that I don't feel good about this year. Brentford being one of them, West Ham being another team that I'm not convinced about at all. So they could be in the mix for a relegation, for example, or a relegation fight. Even Wolves will be there or thereabouts, even though they finished last season very strongly. Leeds, Their transfer business has followed a very consistent theme, which is basically sign all the big fuckers who can compete physically in midfield and head everything out in defence. I mean, Anton Stack, Jakob Bijol, Sebastian Bornau, Sean Longstaff, they're all huge, strong, leggy players who can hold their own in terms of their spaces. I mean, Bijol in particular, he's a centre-back coming from Udinese. He had the 3rd best aerial success rate across Europe last season, behind Virgil van Dijk and Nikola Milenkovic. So they've signed a real sort of force there. But despite their 100-point season, they actually won the Championship. Daniel Farke doesn't really have a lot of credit in the bank. There were calls for him to be sacked when they were clear, at the top of the table last season, because they have this weird habit of collapsing, and one defeat can quickly turn into 3 or 4. Plus, their playing style was a bit sterile at times, and there were rumours that the club were ready to sack him this summer if they found a more exciting candidate. I mean, obviously, they're owned by the 49ers enterprise now, who own the NFL team. They're very smart, data-driven. I'm sure they'll have other managers lined up. So I think he's got a few months, but I wouldn't give him a huge amount of time, because their fingers sort of hovering above the red button, if that makes sense. And then Burnley... if you could put a cricket sound effect for this section, because I could probably, that would probably offer more than what I could tell you. They're managed by Scott Parker. They kept 29 clean sheets in 45 games last season, which is really impressive. They have lost James Trafford, who was a big part of that record, although I still think he looks a bit like a lanky sixth former, and I think he will struggle if he plays consistently at this level. But I don't mind them coming back with a strong defensive identity, because I like it better for a promoted side than doing what Burnley did last time under Vincent Kompany, because they were just eaten alive playing that possession-based style of football when they realised that everyone else was better than them, but not only better, but fitter and stronger. So
and they
just killed them completely.
And they didn't change. There was no point at which they changed.
So that's going to be their issue. Can they find the level? I mean, obviously they signed Leslie Ugochukwu, who's a decent player from Chelsea. Marcus Edwards could be a decent pickup as well. But again, Armando Broja, is he a level raiser? I'm not sure. I think he's too injury prone, and goals are ultimately the most important currency for you. So yeah, my hopes are not super high for them. And Sunderland, it's an interesting one actually, because when it comes to their transfer business, they've done the opposite of what Leeds have done, and they've invested heavily in youth. And it's consistent with their model under their ownership, under Kirill Lewis-Dreyfus, which is more youth focused anyway, but they're still effectively gambling on potential. I mean, they get these players in before anyone else does and hope they can develop and find their feet quickly. I mean, Habib Diarra, they signed from Strasbourg, really good box-to-box midfielder. They got Noah Siddiqui from Saint-Gilloise, Chemsdine Talbi from Club Bruges. So they found a couple of these gems in Belgian football and French football. Obviously, Simon Adingra as well is gone there. I didn't think he got entirely fairly treated at Brighton. I thought he was a decent player. Granit Xhaka is going to be there as a bit of a hand holder, the experienced guy. He spent 2 weeks with Eric Ten Hag and said, nope, I'm getting the fuck out of here.
Enzo Lafay in there as well, who's like
a good player, who's played at Roma, was in France as well. So there is pressure on them to survive, obviously, but I don't think it will be as intense as Leeds or Burnley, for example, who have been here before. They've worn the T-shirt. They're a bit yo-yo, whereas Sunderland will be just riding this euphoria and sort of attacking it with a freshness and a vibrancy. They've got a good young team. I still think they'll fall short in the end because it's a big jump. And I think as much talent as you do have in terms of a 20, 21-year-old, 22-year-old, it's very sobering, the Premier League. and we've seen seasoned professionals come in for a lot of money and still struggle. But I think they'll be here with a freshness, and I don't know if every game, every result will be a referendum. But I don't know if I would be comfortable backing any of those promoted sides as a sort of option to buck the trend, if that makes sense.
Okay, I'm going to put you on the spot, and I'm gonna like, one of them is going to do it. Which one do you think will do it? Like, Sunderland have been out of the Premier League for 8 years.
Yeah,
I feel there's an element of sort of Luton Town a couple of seasons ago to Sunderland. I don't really back them. Scott Parker, I'm sorry, Mr. Cardigan, I don't really rate his ability, to do the job at Premier League level, right? But I also think there are a couple of teams this season who may well fall quite a bit short of where we saw them last season. So you mentioned Brentford. Keith Andrews has taken over there. He's got a big job in his hand. They've lost Brian and Bomo. They've held on to Yoan Wissa for now, but who knows what might happen there. I have a feeling they're going to struggle. I have a sort of gut feeling about Fulham as well this season.
Okay.
Who, Marco Silva's a good manager, has done well, but they really haven't added anything to the squad.
Not at all, yeah.
They've got some good players, but I just wonder if they go on a bit of a run. I'm not sure they'll get all the way down, but I'm going to pick, of the 3 promoted teams to stay up, I will pick Leeds.
Me too.
Right.
I think if anyone's going to do it, it will be them, because they've got a bit of Premier League nous in there. I think they've signed a lot of players who can suit the Premier League. Kind of big guys, strong guys, covering space, good at heading the ball out. I think they've got a few talented players in transition as well. I still think they're short in attacking areas, to be honest, to make a big impact in the league. I mean, obviously, when you look at them, when they had Marcelo Bielsa at the club, they had a lot of exciting young talent there, like Crescencio Somerville, Rafinha was there. They had Willy Gnonto, who's obviously still there, but I just think they might fall short in the attacking areas. Sure. Dan James is there, but again, he couldn't really cut it at United. So, but I think if one of them was going to do it, I would go for Leeds as well. But I think the Premier League could do with that. It could do with that by all accounts. It's just getting really difficult because the gap is only getting bigger every year.
It sure is. Okay, right. Some quick fire ones before we finish. Give me your top 4. It doesn't have to be in order, but the 4 teams you think are going to finish in the top 4.
Oh, we're not committing to order.
No. I think it's too much to ask people to predict, exactly the way it's going to end up. You just don't know. But I think it's sort of more interesting to sort of predict the top 4 and see, in what order they finish. If we get all 4 right, who knows? So I'll let you go first. I mean, I've got 3. I think there's 3 that are obvious,
It's nothing too groundbreaking here, but it's going to be Arsenal, Liverpool, City and Chelsea as my top 4.
Okay. I mean, Arsenal, City, Liverpool are my 3. Chelsea should, but I don't see anyone else.
If it's not them, who would it be in your mind?
It sounds absurd, but I was just sort of looking at Manchester United simply because of the stature of the club. But I do think those issues that they have defensively and in midfield make it a little more difficult. So I will go with Chelsea. I don't really see anyone else. We had one here like, who are going to be the dark horses? I don't see a team that could be dark horses. You've got one. Go on.
I've got one. Everton. I think Everton could do something next year. I really do.
What?
Yeah, I'm all in on the Moyes machine.
I think
new stadium vibes. Everyone's happy. They've completely rebuilt their attack. They've got Grealish coming in. They've signed Tieno Barry, who's like Beto on steroids. Iliman and Jais had a really good preseason. They could sign Tyler Dibbling. They're doing stuff.
Okay,
Okay, I'm all in on Everton.
All right. Well, that's a fairly hot take, I would say. I don't think there's any chance that they're going to finish in the top 4, but I could be wrong, and I will
maybe not top 4, but
they
could be top 6. Okay. Top 6.
Yeah, you never know. I mean, Moyes has the experience, and the new stadium is either going to be a real positive for them or completely weird. And it takes them a while to get used to their
like
new
wearing
surroundings.
a new pair of shoes.
Yeah, exactly. I got blisters on your heels for 6 months of the season. Who is going to be the Golden Boot?
Boring. Erling
Haaland. Yeah, that's what I have written down as well. I will go different to you. Erling Haaland. Is there a... oh, God.
I mean, none of us expected Wissa to be there, Chris Wood to be there last year or thereabouts. I know Salah ran away with it in the end, but, you know, maybe there could be someone coming out of the blue.
I just need to look see, is there a 33-year-old journeyman from New Zealand who, you know, we're not expecting?
Because they grow on trees.
They really do. The one I would say is, depending on when it gets sorted, it could be Isak at Liverpool, who could push Haaland close. And look, as Arsenal fans, we would hope that Victor Gyökeres could push as well. I just think we'll probably have a bit more rotation up front than Manchester City and maybe Liverpool if they do get Isak in. So it could be more of a share the goals around situation for Gyökeres and Kai Havertz. I hope that's it. But like, you know, I'd quite happily let Haaland or Isak or whoever or Salah win the Golden Boot if we can get 2 20-goal plus seasons out of Gyökeres and Havertz, which I think would be super beneficial for us. Young player of the season, the only thing I could think of here is like somehow Phil fucking Foden will win this again.
Yes, 35-year-old Phil Foden with his 18th Young Player of the Year award.
I fucking love winning Young Player, me.
I'm going to go for Morgan Rogers.
Morgan Rogers.
Even though he is getting on a little bit in terms of this award, but he would be eligible. And he is who I'm going for. I think he's going to have a big season for Aston Villa.
I'm going to go completely crazy and say Ethan Nwaneri. Why not? Why not?
Why not?
Why not? It could happen.
Why not?
Could just as easily happen as anything else. Plus, I can't really think of any young players at this point in time on other clubs. Right. I think the final one that we have, unless you've got something else to add to this in the end, is the first manager for the sack.
Yeah. There is player of the season as well, and I put Bukayo Saka.
Okay.
To break Thierry Henry's assist record.
At last. With
a 20-goal season contribution as well.
20 goals, 23 assists for Bukayo Saka.
Easy.
I'm all in on that.
Yeah.
We need to end this on a positive note, as could be some of these sacking options. There's 2 in my mind.
Okay.
That I have.
Go on, hit me with yours first.
Okay, first one is Eddie Howe.
He was not on my list.
Yeah, I just feel like he could struggle.
A bit of a messy divorce happening there.
Maybe so. The other one, and this is another club who I think will have a significant differential between this season and last season. The season that they had last time around and the season that they're going to have this time. And that's Nuno Espirito Santo.
Ooh. To get the Marinakis chop.
Yeah.
Under the guillotine.
Exactly. I think Forest completely and utterly overperformed to a ridiculous extent last season. Like, fair play to them,
for sure.
Until such time as they became, snitches, and we know what snitches get. Stitches from being chopped by Mr. Marinakis. But no, I think they just were. It was a lightning bolt, storm in a teacup. Is that the right way of putting it? It's just like a cocktail of whatever. A good cocktail for them. It worked out. And I don't think there's any chance that they do that again. And I think Nuno will be the guy to get the chop, because that guy does not mess around as soon as he thinks things are going the wrong way. So those are my 2, Eddie Howe and Nuno. Okay,
my one is a bit rogue as well, and it's actually Oliver Glasner, but not because he'll be sacked. I think he'll walk.
He'll resign, yeah.
And actually, as we've been recording, there's been an Orm bomb.
Oh, no.
Saying that Liverpool are in talks with Crystal Palace for Mark Gahey. So if he leaves, and if Eze leaves, and they haven't signed anyone, I think that situation could get very messy very quickly. And he's alluded to it a couple of times as well. He said, I thought we'd be more aggressive in the market. I was promised players quickly. And look, we're here on the 12th of August, and I know they're doing really well. But at some point, do you just stand still? and I do get a bit worried for them about that. So I think he'll walk. That's my take.
I wonder what the price for Gahey is. He is in his last year. In the last year,
they said there's no official bid yet, but LFC stepping up efforts. So I think it could be 40 mil,
40, 50 million.
And actually, he should be in the door at Liverpool because he can play both sides. So he solves a lot of issues for them. And it's just a nice contract opportunity as well with him having 1 year left.
I don't mind that, to be honest, I have to say. That doesn't bother me, Mark Gahey going to Liverpool. I think he's decent, but I don't think he's particularly special. I think he's quite small.
Maybe they don't need anyone special, though.
No, that's true. They've just got all the guys in the world to score the goals. But if they drop 40-odd million on Gahey and then they're looking to spend another 150 on Isak, which is what it could easily be, that's another 190 million pounds.
So they found oil under Anfield.
Yeah, exactly. What's going on? Is there a diamond mine under there or something? You know, it would bring their outlay, and I'm not saying their net spend, but it would bring their outlay close to £500 million in one window. I mean, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah, that is pretty mad. Is there a reserve player that they'll sell for 50 million somewhere? Yeah,
Scott Stronkington. He's come up through the academy.
And they're gonna, he impressed me for England.
They're going to sell him to Bournemouth, who are desperate for players, for £78 million. And that's how they balance the books. That's how they do it.
I think Glasner, and it would be a big shame because I think Palace have found something really good under him, but I'm just a little bit worried about the situation.
Okay, give me one then, beyond a guy walking, give me a guy who you think might get sacked.
Sacked? Daniel Farke.
Okay.
He'll get sacked November, Christmas time. They'll bring in someone who will have a Glasner-esque impact and sort of finish them 16th or 15th.
Glasner, maybe. They'll bring in Glasner.
Oliver Glasner. Well, the Leeds have a big Red Bull connection now.
Yes, of course.
That could work with his Bundesliga/Austrian roots. So
that would be interesting.
Football's done some weird shit, Andrew.
It really has. And football clubs these days are ruthless. And there is a ruthless 38-game Premier League season ahead. And you can enjoy it with us on Patreon if you so decide. If you've enjoyed this episode and you'd like to hear one of these every week, in which we talk about all the weekend's Premier League action, you can sign up. It's just $6 a month, plus VAT where applicable, at patreon.com/Arseblog. It gives you access to the 30. We do a preview podcast for every game. You get Discord chat. You get a weekly newsletter. Andrew Allen puts a weekly newsletter together, and it supports everything else that we do on Arseblog. All the free stuff that's out there for everybody. If all of that is worth $6 a month to you, patreon.com/Arseblog. Right, we better leave it there. Phil, as ever, thank you very much indeed, and I'm looking forward to spending these 38 games and the whole new season with you every week.
Absolutely. Yeah, batteries are recharged, and also another advert for the Patreon. Could there be another new player pod coming?
That's true. That's true. We do a new player podcast every time we sign a new player. So there've been quite a few of those this summer. So
in about 3 weeks, there were 15. I mean, look, if you want to know more about Rafael Leao when we sign him on deadline day, you know where to sign up. So
well, you're giving people hope there, Phil. So let's hope that does come true, or something comes true before the end of the window. Whether it's Eze, whether we save him from Tottenham, whether he goes somewhere else, we'll wait and see. For now, though, folks, take it easy. Hope you enjoyed this show. We will catch you on the next one. There's more to come. Obviously, this week we'll have a regular Arsenal season preview Arsecast, and of course a preview podcast on Patreon looking ahead to our first game of the season against Manchester United. For now, though, take it easy, and we will catch you on the next one.